Hey y'all, my name is Mariana Williams, and today I'm excited to share some of the success tips for beginning educators that I learned from my field experiences in educational psychology this semester. This presentation is going to focus on communication and inclusion through the lens of a future speech language pathologist. I am a speech language pathology major, so I did both of my field experiences in either a classroom with a speech therapist or a triad classroom, and just seeing how communication and inclusion through speech therapy just engages students and makes sure that they feel seen and cared for. Throughout my field experience, I observed classroom communication strategies. For my first one, it was in a speech therapy setting at an elementary school. And then my second one was explored through a special education practices in a triad classroom. These experiences helped shape how I view inclusive education as a future SLP. I believe that communication is foundational to every student's learning, and I think all behaviors are a form of communication, even if those behaviors may be hard and bad in the moment. That is a student's form of communicating with you. Today, I'm going to share what I learned and provide practical tips that we can use in our own classrooms and our own speech sessions and all of the things. So, the goal of this is just to share some insight from the field experiences and psychological theories that I learned about. And then we're just going to focus on inclusive communication and practical classroom strategies that we can carry out. So, for my educational stance, I believe that every child deserves access to meaningful communication. I think one of the things that we sometimes take for granted is our access to be able to communicate freely. For a lot of students who are nonverbal or in triad classrooms, they do not have access to this communication. It is harder for them to communicate. So, as I touched on in the last slide, even their behaviors is a form of them communicating with you what they need, what they want in a classroom. As a future SLP, I think inclusion is just so important, and we need to be intentional and support our students because we want to just collaborate with them and also just collaborate with other teachers and those that you're working with. If that's SLPs, if that's OT, SLP being speech language pathologist, OT being occupational therapist, if that's the triad teacher, if that's the general education teacher, if that's administration. How can we welcome these students into our environments and make them feel seen, loved, and cared for? And also just have instruction that is appropriate and essential for their learning and growth. How can we support their learning and growth in our classroom and be trauma informed? I think it's just so essential to helping these students develop and just blossom and just see their full potential. So, tip number one is scaffolding communication with multi-model support. In my first field experience, I saw a lot of this with simplified language. I noticed how the SLP used simplified language and modeled correct articulation and utilized visual aids. So this was done through the SLP just modeling what she wanted to see her student or client do in that session. If that was saying the word tree, and then she would wait and allow the student to respond and say tree. I think that is just so important to just simplify the language that we're using and not make it too complicated or expand it in too many ways, because if we add too many words, it can just confuse our little kiddo that we're sitting in session with. So I think simplified language and then just modeling is so important. And then as we articulate, just showing the correct articulation models. Even with a little baby, I know it can be so fun to babble and baby talk, but actually it is very helpful if you use the correct words instead of using baba, bottle, and putting words to their language, which just helps them correlate an object to a word and gives them more language. This helps students understand and participate more actively. This also aligns with Vygotski's zone of proximal development, where learners benefit from the guided support, and Pigot's theory, which empathizes the developmental appropriate strategies. So I think it's just so important for like future educators and new educators to incorporate visuals and gestures and simplified instructions to meet learners at their level. So we can do this through visual schedules, having a lot of models in our classroom, hands-on activities, even using ASL, American Sign Language, throughout speech therapy can be really helpful. And this is just like how we can apply tip number one. So, tip number two is going to be collaborate across disciplines. And okay, we're not even on the slide. I apologize. There we go. We're going to collaborate. So, I think collaboration is just so key between the general education teachers, the special education teachers, and the SLP. This just supports holistic learning and builds inclusive classrooms. So, when we want students to feel just seen and cared for and feel like they are welcome in the environment, we have to communicate in all settings. We cannot have one classroom where a child feels welcomed in and included, and then another room where a student feels like they're on the outskirts of that. So, in the triad classroom, I observed the general education teacher and the special education teacher and paraprofessional work together really awesomely to just like create an environment that was supporting all students. So they made sure that if the child was in the triad classroom, that they were getting the hands-on material that they needed, and they were also being able to build relationships in that classroom with their peers. But if they also stepped into a general education classroom, they were included and they had like a buddy or somebody to just like support them and encourage them throughout their learning process. So I also just think that this makes it easy to carry over goals, to carry over objectives in the classroom. So we can apply this by just being teachers who partner with those around us. I think partnership and community is such an important key to just like the education field. So as we like work together, we can just do that together. And the theories is rooted in the social constructivism and co-teaching theories. So we should just seek out partnerships with our specialists and those around us, because who knows, they may have thoughts or ideals that we can use and apply in our classroom to make sure that our classroom is just like collaborating and we're making an inclusive environment for our exceptional learners. Tip number three is just going to be to leverage our assistive technology. I think something that I have seen so strongly is like the lack of the PEC system, which is the picture exchange communication system, and then AAC, which is argumentative alternative communication. Um, I just like saw the power of this firsthand throughout the movie Out of My Mind, which was just like a movie observation that I also did on top of observing in the classroom setting. But I just see the power of that and how students who are nonverbal in that movie were able to participate and express themselves using the technology tools that they had access to. So this relates to the universal design for learning and Skinner's behavior theory, which where technology can reinforce communication behaviors. So this can be done through a communication app. Um, like AAC devices are obviously more advanced than like PECs, which is like pictures, and that's just like a form of communication where a student can like hold up a picture and communicate with you. But I think just like we need to apply this into our schools more, because I feel like we have so many nonverbal students and friends who don't have access to communication because we're not offering them like PECs and AAC. And just like they're minimally verbal, so they don't know like how to express what they want. So I think this is just like a great tip as an educator and as a future SLP to just like make sure we're educating like our general education teachers on what these things are, how they can be used in their classrooms, to just like support exceptional learners. So yeah. Our final tip is just practicing reinforcement and a structured flexibility. I saw this a lot in both classrooms. I saw this in the speech setting, and I also saw this in the triad setting. Some examples of this was like a token system, a praise, and a redirection from reports. So in the speech setting, they use a model where there are 4 boxes, and at the beginning of the speech session, your student gets to pick what they're working for. So that could be a sticker, an M&M, something so little, so small, and as they're like participating in their speech session and meeting like their goals or their objectives. So some of our objectives in the SLP room that I entered in, where we were going to be attentive, we're going to be respectful, we're going to participate, and we're going to be good listeners. So if a student was doing that, they would receive a happy face on their chart, and at the end of the session, they would then receive what they were working for. We can apply this because as educators, we should balance behavior expectations with also empathy and structure. And I think with our friends who may have autism or Down syndrome or behavior issues, they need a structured environment. And also, we just see this throughout BF Skinner's operant conditioning for beginning and we can do this through also like verbal praise and just like gentle redirection. I think having consistent routines with room for flexibility can help support student behavior and learning, which we also see a lot through BF Skinner's operant conditioning. So, some of like the specific teaching strategies and interventions that I found practical were differentiated differentiated instruction, visual schedules, repetitive verbal drills, partner small group work, task scaffolding, and peer modeling. These all promote accessibility and inclusion across all content areas. So instruction that is differentiated just like allows students to have a different routine, but then also with the visual schedule, they know what's coming. And repetitive verbal drills opens up their communication because then it's just like so repetitive that their brains are just starting to pick up on it. Also just like peer modeling and watching their peers is also super helpful. So yeah, some meaningful technology tools that I saw, like we talked about PECs and AAC devices, some apps, Boom Cards, Seesaw, Google Slides with voiceover features. And this is just like to engage all learners throughout the learning process and just make sure they feel seen. And also Prologue to Go, which is a app on an iPad that is like kind of a mini version of an AAC device with a lot of like communication cards and access to stuff like that is awesome. So just opening up the realm of communication for exceptional learners who may not be able to communicate verbally and just making sure that they're seen and they're heard and they're cared for. Um Here's just like some key takeaways from my experience is that communication and inclusion is success. If we do those things hand in hand together, if we communicate our goals with our students, if we include our students, they are going to succeed in our classrooms. We are going to see students who are performing better and who are reaching their goals. If we have supports that just like support students and all of that, better outcomes. Again, we're going to see their goals increase. And my observations just prove that. And I just now understand that when we collaborate together as a team, um, and just like even make small changes, like using a communication board or pairing a student with a buddy, that can just make such a difference on their learning and how they thrive in the classroom. Um, what I learned through these experiences is just how essential it is to adapt to our students and the instruction that they need and the communication. I now understand that communication isn't just talking, but it's about making connections. And inclusion just like requires you to be aware, adaptable, and advocate. So I just encourage you as we are all on our journey to either be SLPs or teachers or all of the things, just make sure you're advocating for your students. Do your research, go to events, raise money for them. And I think this just like reinforced my passion for becoming a future SLP and advocating for all my future learners. So, finally, as I wrap up, I just want to encourage you to stay open and flexible and just know that every child communicates differently. Try new strategies, and it is our job to just meet them where they are and encourage just like them to reflect and also just like grow. And also use what works best for you and advocate for your students. Again, advocate for your students. So, here are my references. And I just thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great rest of your semester.